Good morning. I'm Voltaire Tupas, and this is Rappler Talk. We're honored to have with us Attorney Christian Monsod, who is the current chairperson of the National Agriculture and Fisheries Council Committee on Climate Change. We are observing the disaster month. This July is disaster month, but it's not only about preparedness; it's also about mitigation, and part of it, of course, is reduction of the carbon emissions, and then, so we're going to discuss the policies that are in place, the trends internationally, and other policies on the ground which affect agriculture, fisheries, and the environment. So thank you for joining us, Attorney Munsod.
Thank you for inviting me.
So we have entered a new phase of the policy implementation regarding climate change, as inspired by the Paris Agreement. As we speak, where are we now as far as the agriculture sector is concerned in terms of contributing to mitigation?
Yeah, well, the
adaptation?
the agricultural sector, to me, the most interesting strategy of the agricultural sector, other than the fact that they're mainstreaming climate change into all their programs, is that they're going to migrate from the silo commodity approach in agricultural development to a science-based approach that uses ecological maps and also extension services that are custom built to the ground level, because we're archipelago and very differentiated conditions at the local level. That proposed migration will be a new paradigm, and we may have a chance because of that. But there are a lot of things that have to be done to do that, to accomplish that.
It's good that you pointed it out, because the government in Paris committed 70% reduction of its emission. And agriculture is one of the sectors which is being targeted to contribute to that commitment. Do you think it's feasible as
You mean the 70%?
the 70% reduction?
Well, personally, I think it's virtually impossible to do that. And if you recall, there was a meeting just before the September, before they went for the October meeting, in which the original proposal was, I think, 30% unconditional. But the decision was made to shift it to 70% with the conditions of financing and technological assistance. But the 70%, I really don't know where it came from. I don't know if there was really a scientific studies on the 70%. But it's going to be very difficult, even in agriculture, because there is a law that calls for the mechanization of agriculture, whereas we're talking organic farming as a major part of that. Organic farming only covers 492,000 hectares, right? And out of 9 million. And we don't have the institutional backup for that, because in organic farming, in the Department of Agriculture, there are 12 people. 11 are coterminous, and the head is lent from another department. So we have to do a lot of things on this.
You're familiar with the terrain, you're familiar with the sector. What is the capacity of the agriculture sector in terms of addressing the...
Well, if you talk about capacity,
to
I
contribute
think history will show you that that's underperforming agriculture. Not just this administration, all throughout, it's underperformed. But it has underperformed because the reason for this is wrong policies. And that's why I'm very happy that they're going to migrate to a new system, and hopefully that's a change. There are some people who are saying, well, like Father Walpole, for example, who's saying that the soil conditions are beyond repair. But others are saying, well, if you can make agricultural land out of deserts, why can't we do it here? So that we need a lot of research on this, and that's one of the 7-point program of the Department of Agriculture. Right?
How can the sector contribute to the target? I understand on one hand you want to scale up production, but at the same time you also want to contribute to achieving our commitments under
Well, as I
COP.
said, it's going to be difficult to do that commitment given our food security problems. In fact, there are people who are saying, why don't we test the peak of this? Because that's what the developed countries did, right? They emitted so much gas because they were developing. And here we are, we're trying to develop, and we may be putting already constraints there. So I think that this seven-point program, if I may it's called the Agricultural Mitigation.
Yeah.
You know about this?
Yeah.
Okay. Adaptation Mitigation Initiative in Agriculture. 7 parts, right? 7 systems, mainstreaming, information system, and there are some progress there already. You know, like for example, 154 or 153 weather stations to complement the OST. And then they're just beginning now to have programs to inform the farmers. They're beginning on the credit side, insurance side, but the coverage is below 10%. So there's a long way to go on those things. And then they're saying that they started already since 2 or 3 years, or maybe 4 years ago, on infrastructure that is resilient, the kind of infrastructure that can withstand all kinds of natural hazards. Things like this, right? And I think finally the Department of Agriculture is thinking very hard on this. They're looking at different breeds of livestock. They're looking at short gestation plants.
Yeah.
They're looking at 20 crops that they will look into they will say suitability of certain areas to this major 20 crops, which includes high value agricultural products.
The transition towards achieving clean energy will be painful according to experts, of course, but there are initiatives that are inspiring, that are
You're
hopeful.
talking about coal plants?
Yeah,
Okay.
across sectors, agriculture, coal plants. Others try to integrate programs so that they are sustainable. But is there a good practice which you can show at the community level, provincial or regional, which we can highlight as a good start in our transition?
I think they're anecdotal at this point. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of the area where they're doing this. You know why? One of the reasons for this, if you look at the Philippine Development Plan, right, 2011-2016, there's no climate change component. It's buried in the biodiversity and ecological chapter. And it should have, climate change should have a focus in the development plan. And because these are not called for specifically in the development plan and action programs, the LGUs really have no specific assignments or accountability under the present development plan. And I think this will be changing, because I understand that the new president even wants color-coded areas on suitability of crops and so on. And I think Governor Piñol seems to know what he's doing, which makes us very happy. That they gave him a study on rubber in front of him, and he caught it right away. And he said, "But isn't your soil study 40 years old? It's the soil component."
Yeah.
And he caught the
It's not
Department of
updated,
Agriculture
yeah.
people flat-footed, because they were making an example of rubber based on soil qualities and so on that are 40 years old.
Yeah.
But they're going to set their catch-up on this.
The Climate Change Commission is reviewing the targets, apparently because some sectors, including agriculture and the energy sectors, could not meet the targets on time, which is by 2030. So how exactly can the agriculture sector and the energy sector in particular
Well,
help?
I think there are 3 departments involved there: agriculture, DNR, and energy. And from what I'm reading, the priority of the Duterte administration is to reduce electricity prices to favor the consumer. But I think the logic of that should be extended. That if you may be benefiting the consumer today, but guess who will bear the cost of coal plants into the future, because you'll have coal plants for 25 years. Why aren't we, for example, already going, in a big way on solar? understand the cost of solar is going down. 2 years ago, it was what, 9, 10 pesos per watt kilo, and now it's going down to 4 to 5.
Yeah, in fact, the trend is clearly not consistent with the international developments. When former U.S. Vice President Al Gore visited the Philippines,
Yes.
he said that we're left behind, especially the coal-minded leaders, and he was referring to some of our leaders in the country. They're left behind because internationally, the market is catching up. The demand is growing, but in the Philippines,
And the cost is going down.
it's going down. But in the Philippines, we increased our consumption of coal by 27%, which is, of course, contradictory to our commitment.
23, I read that 23 new coal plants have been approved.
Yep.
These will be stranded assets
Yeah.
in a while, and then we will be behind in solar.
Yeah.
And as now we can already do it. I don't know if this is correct, but I understand that the son of Senator Libiste has offered, I don't know, SM
Yep.
prices at 20-30% below Meralco
Yeah.
on solar. And then if once you get houses with solar panels as roofs, then you have a feedback mechanism.
But these are only pockets of initiatives. You have solar panels here, you have wind there. But in terms of scaling up, that's really the problem, because the mindset, as far as many businessmen are concerned, they are
You know why
in
that
the
kind of a mindset?
Yeah.
Because if you look at the history, look at the energy sector, the whole structure of the energy sector, the research, the engineering, the consultants, and so on, are all based on fossil fuel.
Yeah.
That's a whole chunk of so-called expertise that may find themselves without jobs.
Yeah.
And so that's the headwind, right? There are two headwinds. That headwind, and then the headwind that people are saying we will make the decisions if the cost goes down faster. But I think at 4 to 5 pesos per kilowatt is good for a kilowatt hour. It's good. It's already a good price. We can start, and then understand that the storage costs are expected to also go down. So what are we waiting for?
Yeah. That's the pricing side. But what would it take to move this forward in terms of changing the policy environment for businesses? Because they're also afraid. They know that it would be painful. It's costly, they say. Scale-wise, that's the economic argument, of course.
Yeah, but I think we should challenge the business sector who say we have cheap or clean coal costs. Then why are they asking for a long-term supply contract?
Yeah.
Why don't they take the market risk? I'm sure they won't like to do that.
But are you optimistic that in the long run, in the Philippines or in the region and across the world, the Paris Agreement will succeed based on its?
There are so many questions in the Paris Agreement.
Do you have a
Everything
particular?
is voluntary. Wait, I
Yeah,
have a list.
yeah.
I have a list.
So are you not as hopeful as others were?
Are you? Okay. First of all, the commitments now are non-binding.
Yes.
Right? They can be changed anytime, right?
Yeah.
Now, the approach is in effect that those who caused the emission in the first place, that's already there, are really got away with it. They're only bound by their voluntary offerings going forward. So, what is their accountability to the world, right? They went into those policies that emitted so much gas, and then when they're up there, they kick the ladder for the rest of us and say, "Whoa! Now there are rules for this that you have to follow." Right? We, for example, how much do we contribute? Very little to the greenhouse effect, right? 0.28 of 1%, and yet here we are. We're being we say, oh goodness, we have to make commitments here and so on and so forth. And somebody said, should we test the limits so that, because we owe it to our people on food security and development. But then the other side of that is if we make commitments and we don't follow them, we might have no access to funds.
Yeah.
And we cannot do all the things we want to do on adaptation. This is the key. without funds and without technology. We know that.
Which was the difference as far as that agreement is concerned, because the rich countries are pouring in resources into financing, and so that was the assumption of our commitments. If we will receive funding, then we can proceed with our commitments in achieving our
Yes,
commitments.
yes.
So if we have the financing available now, don't you think it's a positive, it's a good development?
I don't know if it's available.
Because it's still commitment, even as
That 100
Yeah.
that 100 billion a year. I don't know if it's really available. And then we claim that there was an improvement, and there was light at the end of the tunnel because the loss and damage clause under the Warsaw Convention has been kept. But then it was kept under the mitigation. Under mitigation and not under adaptation. And I understand from the experts that for 2 years, there has been no resolution on what exactly the focus of agriculture should be. The developed countries want to focus on mitigation. The developing countries want to focus, say that it's about adaptation, right? And it has very serious implications on the funding.
what do you think as far as the Philippines is concerned? Where should we focus our
Well,
mitigation
no
efforts
question.
on agriculture?
Adaptation, no question. But as we said, it's adaptation, but mitigation as a co-benefit, for example, for agriculture. That's fine. But we cannot abandon the adaptation as the main focus of our agricultural policies.
We've seen that in Kidapawan a few months ago. Clearly, that was a failure of adaptation and, in fact, mitigation. Farmers could not.
But it's interesting that among all the areas in the Philippines, the whole Philippines, that Cotabato area is the one that has the feature of real drought.
Yeah.
It's of all the entire country. If you look at the drought conditions, that's the worst one.
Yes.
And there was a failure there of policy and implementation that was totally unnecessary. I represented the Manobos here in the human rights thing, and they said, we were told to go to the other place that they were already distributing goods, and so that blocked the other road, and that led to breaking it up. Because while the road was open, there was no need to break up. They didn't know what was happening, right?
And we're only talking about relief, but the more the deeper problem would be the problem of the farmers. They could not plant. They were not given
That's true.
the funds.
That's right.
And the necessary tools to prepare for the drought. And now we're entering La Nina, another problem.
That's correct. And the thing is, we have to rewrite the National Adaptation Plan.
Okay.
Because when it was written, the parameters were not there. That's the new parameters now. So we are really in a very early stage here. And it needs all the support to do this. And we need funding for all of this. And there are things to be done, although I think we have done quite a bit in the passing the laws regarding climate change and all that. But now that we are moving and we're migrating to a new paradigm, and we should stick to the principle that it should be adaptation. And I don't know how the developing countries will win that argument.
Can you describe that model, that paradigm you're talking about? Simply put, beyond funding, what are the parameters do you have in mind?
You mean agriculture?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to change this focus on commodities and the silo system. I think we have to review this law mandating mechanization, right? And we have to go in the planning to use the agroecological maps and not the maps that are very particular about political boundaries.
Yeah.
We should also, and I think it's correct to say that we should have suitability, capability to inform and advise farmers so that it's custom built for the local conditions. If we do this too, science-based agricultural mapping and custom built planting for farmers, we have a chance. But that needs quite a bit of effort, and I'm not sure that the DA today has the capability to do all of these things. I think we need fresh blood in the DA. There are some very good people there, but this is good. Then we have to rethink the thing about the devolution of extension services to LGUs. They've done a very poor job of that, and so the LGUs have to be brought here into the picture on the real capacity to help in the planning and implementation of this program.
Because they're very responsive, response oriented. They pour money into response efforts, but preparedness wise, mitigation wise, the money is not there.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's the
right.
problem. And in fact, it was discussed during a recent forum on disaster preparedness. But if we will not deliver on our commitments, what do you think
We cannot not deliver.
We have to.
In fact, as mentioned earlier, I think Red Constantino has a suggestion that you might want to explore. He said, why don't we make it two parts? First part is our commitments unconditional, and the second part are commitments that are conditional. So, and we can move towards that, and maybe that might help, because if what's important is really fulfilling the unconditional commitment, and that may be 40-50%. I mean, nobody still has a figure, but that's something that the experts should sit down and determine.
Let's go to the energy sector.
Yes.
What's the concrete climate action plan should they
There's
take?
no such thing as clean coal.
That's clear. But there was an argument during the campaign that
come on.
it's being...
No, I think the more important issue is the question of bringing down the cost to help the poor on the cost of electricity.
Okay.
And I think there should be a subsidy system here. Then industry and commerce says, what about us? What about us? And I think that we have to bite the bullet here and say, let's take a look at the long term. It may not even be that long term if we shift to solar in a big way. But we have to be careful, because the funders, the financing for all of these things, plus the expertise is not in solar, they're in fossil fuel. But what is interesting is the news the other day about the appointees will not be not qualified to access a fund. Is it Norway or Sweden that because of they do not meet the standards? The Scandinavian countries are way ahead here. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, their pricing of carbon is very high. I don't know what's over $100. In Europe, it's 50. And I don't know if I read the right thing. Is that the Department of Energy is saying that they don't like to tax carbon, and that's one way to show that the real cost of coal power is reflected there. If you do that, then you're not really including all the costs of coal power.
In the Philippines, when we were crafting the Renewable Act, energy law, the problem was the mix. There was a concern on the proper, the perfect mix.
Not being dependent on one.
Yeah. So at this point, where are we now?
Well,
what's
so coal is still the biggest, I think.
Have we significantly increased the
Coal. We're still
of other sources like solar?
There has been an improvement.
What's the ideal
renewable and
mix
so on.
in
I
terms
don't
of
know.
capacity?
It depends on the country, but I would think that reducing the fossil fuel and doing renewables, as well as hydraulics, you know, the use of water, even small one, hydro plants, and going all of these other some things that are still experimental. We have to do this. We have to take a longer term. I think our one problem is that our planning is 6 years.
Yeah.
We don't really have visionary planning, research, and saying where do we want to be 25, 50 years from
Yes.
now. We don't have it. There used to be one in UP, but that was said. I think we have to go back to that because we're so concerned about what can the Duterte administration accomplish in 6 years. But they should lay the foundations for the longer term.
The agreement is fairly new, so even the industry is still trying to familiarize with the opportunities, the challenges which the agreement gave them. So what would it take for them?
Go ahead.
The industry, the energy sector, what would it take for them to expedite their efforts to scale up, to
I
invest?
think they really have to sit down, DNR, Energy, and DA, on this, because you know the tendency of energy really is how can we bring down the cost now to the consumer, but the cost, I think, of the longer term cost should be taken into consideration. Of course, they won't be there anymore after 6 years and say, oh, that's not our problem.
Is it only cost, or is it also a question of capacity? Because in reality, they are not prepared to.
Yeah, because
move
all, as I said, you know, the infrastructure of energy is based on fuel, fossil fuel, and that's why when you ask for advice, 90% of the time they'll say there's clean coal now. It's like responsible mining. You know, there's no such thing.
As responsible mind. So how optimistic are you under the current administration? What bold steps should?
I don't think they have resolved that policy issue of which takes precedence. Maybe they could structure the present rates in such a way that you still give subsidies or improve the subsidies there at the poorest component of consumers. But I think they have to take a longer view of how it's going to be for our country.
Earlier, you gave clear suggestions on how to move on as far as the agriculture sector is concerned. As far as energy is concerned, how can they concretely contribute to the achievement of our
I think
goals?
they have to do a lot of research and thinking about policies, and you know, not get involved in knee-jerk reactions that what about the poor in the cost of electricity today. There are many ways to make it up to the poor without incurring the long-term cost of coal power.
In December, there will be another climate change conference in Morocco. What should the Philippines bring
I think
to
we
the
should
table?
rethink our commitments because those are already binding, not only intended but binding, and we should think about the consequences of not meeting our commitments in terms of the funding availability and technology transfers, and that takes a lot of discussions and thinking on the part of the government.
The previous administration was very proud in Paris about its achievement on the reforestation efforts in the country.
Yes. I think we have to review that. We keep on talking about the success of the greening program, but now that we have GPS, you know, with helicopters looking over, because we may find that the standard we're using is wrong, because the standard is how many seedlings have we planted. It's not how many trees have grown. And so the problem is looked at from that angle and saying, if we only had more seedlings, then we will have more quote-unquote reforestation. And now, of course, one of the solutions is eco services by poor communities, so that they take care of the forest. In fact, in some jurisdictions, they say you take care of it, and after 3 or 5 years, it's yours.
Okay.
It's yours. That, to me, that's that's the way to do, is to put the right incentives there for those trees to be cared for, so that they will grow. But I have my reservations about how successful it is when the standard is how many seedlings were planted. In the area where we tested this GPS evaluation, the records show that they're saying, this is Marikina, right, watershed, that 85 to 87% success. And yet there were no trees in many of those areas.
Can you cite a particular story where a community successfully took on the responsibility
Well,
of...
it's beginning in the Marikina watershed area. And right now, there is a meeting, as you know, in Cagayan de Oro, on the Cagayan de Oro River Basin, headed by Archbishop Ledesma. There's going to be a summit there. And they're trying to change the paradigms of cleaning, you know, the mapping, and so on. And hopefully, many things will come out of that.
Moving forward, the Climate Change Commission, which is now engaging in various adaptation and mitigation efforts, where should they focus their energy on under the Duterte administration?
I think the directions are clear. They should focus on adaptation. They should focus on agriculture, because that's the laggard sector in our country. We cannot have sustained growth with agriculture underperforming all the time. And then, of course, energy has to be looked into because of the possible contradictory effects of certain policies in the administration. But you know, what's interesting about the cabinet of President Duterte, and I believe that President Duterte is genuinely pro-poor. What is interesting is he has put together a cabinet of diverse background. And if he can make that cabinet work, he can make the country work. Right?
Yeah. What's your suggestion to the Climate Change Commission in particular, and to President Duterte?
Well, climate change, I think the directions are clear in the climate change.
But as far as the president is concerned, because the president apparently, the former president did not convene the commission before.
Yeah, he had what do you call that, a mental block, because he's the chairman of the Climate Change Commission.
Do you expect him to convene, the current president to convene the commission?
I would think he would. But if he has a good, he has good people, for example, the Anti-Poverty Commission, they should be part of a bigger advisory group for climate change.
And finally, do you see opportunities which the Duterte administration should seize as far as the agreement is concerned?
You mean the Paris Agreement?
Yeah. What should it seize in terms of...
I don't think that we singly as a country can do much. I think these 100 countries that form part of what they call high ambition group should really be mobilized and be more proactive. It's like we should be saying in the international scene that we need a new international order, not always dictated to by the rich countries. In our country, we should have radical social change, and it's time we stand up for that. So it's the same in the international scene. We cannot talk and then at the end say, well, that's the best we can do. You know, we are poor and so on. Well, if 100 countries who are poor can stand up to the West and say, you know, we won't buy your products or something like that, right? Nothing will happen in Paris if we allow the developed countries to dictate the agenda and even dictate the language of the negotiations.
And to the youth, finally, what's your message to young people who find discussions like this, climate change, environment, etc., difficult?
I think our young people are much better than us when we were young, and they are concerned, they are engaged in these arguments and so on, and I'm sure there are many of them have ideas about this. And, you know, I hear all these things about the young are not really interested in these matters. I think we're wrong. I think this is a better generation than ours, and I'm very hopeful.
Oh, by the way, if I may ask, you're one of the framers of the Constitution. Is the Constitution still responsive to the changing times in terms of responding to climate?
You know, the Constitution is one of the most progressive in the world because of the social justice and human development aspects of it. The question is not whether the Constitution is responsive. The question is, why isn't the constitutional agenda being implemented? That's the question. Because if people just read it, the Constitution, the agenda is there, including weather, even climate change. It's there.
On that note, thank you very much for joining us. We would like to thank Green Convergence for organizing this and also for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is Voltaire Tupas. Thank you for watching Rappler Talk. Good morning.